Painkiller is based on the New York article The Family Who Built an Empire Out of Pain and a book, Painkiller, by Barry Meyer. In this series, we see Richard Sackler, played by Matthew Broderick, owner of Purdue Pharma, marketing the drug OxyContin in the 1990s, which was the instigator for the now opioid epidemic in the US.
Is now the #1 opioid in the country,
which has claimed over 450,000 lives since 1999. So what did I think of this series? Well, keep watching to get my thoughts. Hey everyone, it's Jack. I am back for another video today. And I just want to send a quick thank you to everyone who's recently subscribed to my new channel. It means so much to me. Especially, I've been starting to receive some really kind comments, so I appreciate that. And I'm very looking forward to seeing where this heads. And if you are not subscribed yet, why not? Are you dumb? Are you crazy? Please hit that subscribe button and also like this video. I want as many people to find my content as possible. I will also caveat that this video will contain many spoilers for the Netflix series Painkiller. So if you've not watched it yet, or you want to watch it and you don't want to be spoiled, then go watch it. It's 6 episodes. You will fly through it. It's a great binge. Highly recommend. I've got 2 doggy sponsors for you today. The first one is Flo. Hello. And then we have Eve. Say hello, Eve. Mwah! And with that being said, let's get into it. Painkiller, as I said, follows the release of OxyContin in the US, which is an opioid painkiller. These are a diverse range of analgesics to relieve pain. Others that you may be familiar with are codeine, fentanyl, morphine, and heroin. They have long been debated of one of the causative factors of the opioid epidemic, with misuse and abuse at actually 4.3%, and addicts rely on its continued misuse to curb those withdrawal symptoms. Since 1991, prescriptions in the US for opiates has risen from 76 million a year to 289 million each year. And in the US, it's a very different culture to, for example, here in the UK, as when it comes to recreational drugs in teens and young adults, these are actually used more often than other drugs such as cocaine. And I took a particular interest in Painkiller because I suffer from chronic pain. I've been on many medications. The only opiate I've really been on is codeine, so I've never had a high chance of addiction. It's made me think a lot about how unfortunate some individuals found themselves in when doctors prescribed OxyContin and just average normal people ended up getting addicted and losing their lives. In Painkiller, Richard Sackler, who owns Purdue Pharma and who releases the drug OxyContin, is portrayed by Matthew Broderick as pure evil.
You did a good job making all that money, sir.
Thank you.
He comes up with the idea to formulate a controlled release of the drug in order to save his family's corporation after their late father left them in piles of debt. His idea comes from exploiting, in his words, the space between pain and pleasure, a never-ending cycle which reaches no resolution.
Run from pain, run toward pleasure. We place ourselves right there, between pain and pleasure. We will never have to worry about money again.
His also greedy and corrupt siblings seem to have concerns and anxieties throughout the show.
Oxycoffins.
Don't put that in the notes. We are under investigation.
But they choose to favor the out of sight, out of mind, seen by many characters in this show, benefiting from the explosion of OxyContin and booming sales. And this analogy of pain and pleasure and the space in between seems to permeate the entire series. Sackler is plagued by visions of his father, feeling like he will never be good enough for him. He manages to continuously ignore and repress this pain until the final episode. Here we see his father's ghost bludgeon him, an ironic conclusion to the man who claimed he would cure the US of pain. Maybe he should get a prescription of Oxy so he feels better, you think? A motif we see throughout is also him plagued or irritated by a fire alarm, which goes off spontaneously in each episode. This background ringing, we can assume, is another repressed emotion of his, possibly the underlying guilt of causing so many deaths? We're not sure. Also, something interesting about this character is he never seems to actually enjoy and savor the success that OxyContin has brought him and his family. He comes across as emotionally stunted, unable to feel joy or sadness. Instead, his life seems to be an endless pursuit of trying to gain his dad's approval. And I thought this was similar to the bottomless pit of someone with an opiate addiction, looking for craving after craving, only to never fill that void. So top performance from Matthew Broderick, I thought it was amazing. When it comes to the other side and the people exploited and dying from this drug, we see a number of characters throughout the show who give insight to this rising addiction and the death rates. A particularly chilling scene was a man who comes into the pharmacy and is going absolutely crazy trying to break down the back section, raid the drugs. We later see him in a morgue after ingesting many pills at once. We follow Glen Kryger, played by Taylor Kitsch. Also, I thought this was an excellent performance from him. He is a good-natured family man and mechanic, and when he accidentally injures his back and the initial drugs prescribed to him are not strong enough, the doctor decides to prescribe a new drug that's recently come on the market. That's OxyContin.
We can increase the dose. Let's kick you up to 40 milligrams.
And we see him spiral into addiction very quickly. This starts with initially only wanting to take his second dose of the day an hour earlier, to eventually pulling out the kitchen's oven from the wall in search of one tablet that he dropped. And the worst scene of all is when he doesn't realize, they're in a diner, he doesn't realize that he's biting into his own finger when he's eating a burger, as he is just so high on the drug. And this out of sight, out of mind, let's ignore it phenomenon is seen across the board in his family. He fails to admit to himself or acknowledge that he is becoming addicted and starts taking more of the drug in secret. His wife also seems to notice this, but doesn't really say anything. It is her son who has to address the elephant in the room. And Glen's demise from an all-American family man to a junkie is just so heartbreaking to watch. And I thought what was telling here is the nature of addiction is not really understood. He's heavily judged by his family and others for falling down this hole, especially because the doctors are marketing this drug saying it's only a risk of addiction in 1% of people who take it, which is a complete lie. And instead of supporting him and understanding that this is not his fault, they kind of started seeing him as a deadbeat, and this warranted kicking him out, which is just such a shame. So they think he's responsible, and this is something Purdue Pharma play on in the series. When they start getting the lawsuits coming in, they start blaming it on the users. They say they're drug addicts and that's not our fault. When Glen runs out of money and has to go through withdrawal, going to rehab and being on methadone, his wife still won't let him move back in yet. So we see him still placed in this gray area between pain and pleasure. And this is so sad because he's all alone, and this eventually leads to his demise, relapsing, and then we see his tragic death at the end of the series. The character arc was amazing, but I sort of feel like perhaps if there were more characters that we were close to in which we could see how the drug was affecting them in different ways, that would have been helpful. We do see some minor characters throughout, taking the drug, but they're never a sole focus. Just a small criticism there. When it comes to the pleasure side of things, we also see this being portrayed in the sales reps of OxyContin. So in real life, Purdue Pharma, they created a campaign called Partners Against Pain, which had an incentivized bonus system for getting doctors to prescribe higher doses.
The more you prescribe, the more you'll help.
And as I said before, they trained their sales reps to communicate to doctors that the risk of addiction of this drug was less than 1%, a complete lie. Some doctors took this at face value, ultimately leading them to being very prescription happy with the drug, prescribing higher doses. And we do see a few doctors throughout the series catch on immediately.
A drug dealer with a ponytail.
And despite the medication claims, recognize that this is an opiate, it's oxycodone, and even if it's slow release, it's still going to be just as addictive as the drug itself. We get to follow one of these sales reps, Shannon Schaeffer, who's played by Duchovny.
You're the cutest little OxyContin kitten we've seen in a minute.
She's a recent college grad. She comes across as a genuine, kind, and good-natured person who happens to get a job as a sales rep for Purdue Pharma. She is initially trained by the already very corrupt Britt Hufford, who comes across like she's further down the train of the dark side and definitely moved over to exploiting this drug for her own pleasure. We see the two grow close as she lures Schaeffer into a glamorous life, enticing her with fancy clothes, a new car. We see a different kind of addiction here, and that is money. They become extremely money driven. It's all about money, money, money. And they sort of go so fast that they purposely give themselves no time to stop and think about the damage that they're causing by continuing to push and sell this drug. And Britt's character, I think, showed us what can happen when someone represses their emotions so far that all they are left with is their greed and ego. But this is not seen in Schaeffer, as we see her grapple with her conscience, in which it slowly dawns on her throughout the series. The claims she's making about this drug to sell it are far from true. Something I was wondering if it was real were these OxyContin plush toys that we see displayed in pharmacies throughout, and I can confirm that these were in fact real, and they said 80 milligrams on them, which is an exceptionally high dose. Sales reps would bring all sorts of stuff to incentivize the doctors, cups of coffee, donuts, a box of donuts spelling out the word OxyContin, and there was also other merchandise, mugs, hats. This was no ordinary drug campaign. And the coffee mug in real life was one of those ones that changes color with heat. And initially it said the one to start with, and then with the heat it would say the one to stay with. So also chilling, at the massive Purdue Pharma party, and after trying a line of OxyContin herself and almost drowning in the pool. This is the point when she decides she can no longer run from this and decides to help Edie Flowers in her investigation and give them all the information she has. And Curtis Wright, played by Noah Harpster, is also an interesting character. He was one of the FDA approvers back in the day and actually was the person who approved OxyContin for release in 1995. We see him going back and forth with Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers, as he cannot see any evidence in their clinical trials that this medication does not have potential for abuse. When he eventually approves the drug, we wonder what happened, and we see that he is now working for Purdue Pharma and set up with a pool, a lovely house, so we can kind of see what happened there. And this happened in real life too. So Curtis Wright in real life claimed that when he started at Purdue Pharma, he had a salary of $185,000 with a sign-on bonus of $379K. And that was the price he paid to be responsible for all these deaths. The controversy around OxyContin was in the messaging of the label. Delayed absorption, as provided by OxyContin tablets, is believed, keyword there, to reduce the abuse liability of a drug. And it was acknowledged that no other drugs would have this sort of language. They wouldn't say something like it is believed to, but this was enough for essentially them to push the drug out into production and the market. Throughout Painkiller, a key part of the story is following Edie Flowers, who's working for the US Attorney's Office as she tries to bring a lawsuit against Purdue Pharma. So I thought she played it really well. She kind of knotted the whole story together. But I did think her character was written, not really her fault, but was written very two-dimensional. She's extremely aggressive, cold, and uncompromising throughout the show. And I would have liked to see a little bit more light and shade in her. I guess her character sort of acted as a center point for all the others, which seemed to be at the extreme ends of pain and pleasure. Final thoughts on this show. I thought it was very well done. Really enjoyed it. I just couldn't wait for each next episode. And it was really thought-provoking. The themes woven throughout, permeating each character, ultimately portrayed that no one was left happy and guilt-free as a result of this scandal. And looking into it, I've always been surprised at how weak some of the claims are for medications to treat certain causes. I mean, they don't need a lot of success in order to market a drug. So if you take something that a doctor says this could very well help you, sometimes the odds are actually against you. You know, there might be like a 3 in 10 chance it will do something for you. And you're putting your body through so much by introducing a new drug, the side effects, and then coming off the drug, which often in those kind of medications can cause a lot of withdrawal. So I really felt for all the characters in the show. And if you want to take anything away and some lessons from this series, I would always try and remember that big pharma and these massive companies are first and foremost businesses that want to produce profit. It is in their interest for patients to need their drugs. That's why they make them. So I'm not against medication in general, and I still take some and they are helping me. But I think when we are given a prescription, we have to remember that we are customers of this pharmaceutical company. It's not just our doctors we should be listening to, but we should be doing our own research as well. And unfortunately, that is the climate we're in. In the same way you would shop around when you're about to buy a new fridge for your house, you need to get keyed up when you're prescribed something and ultimately decide, is this the best decision for you? Painkiller portrays a heartbreaking tragedy which is still impacting millions of people to this day. Addicts are continuously looked down on and judged when they are actually victims in this whole endeavor. The final point I'll add is that each series starts with a real person detailing how they lost a loved one, a son, a partner, because they were prescribed OxyContin after an accident. And they are just so heartbreaking to watch. Super short clips, but it really puts stuff into perspective and how these people have been forgotten. So what did you think of Painkiller? Did you watch it? Did you enjoy it? Did it make you think more about prescription drugs and OxyContin? Have you ever been prescribed OxyContin or an opioid? Please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. And with that said, I will see you soon in my next video. Hope you have a great day. Bye.